Welcome to the Black Sunday Tapes, the classic horror podcast. We are back after quite a long break with
It's been a
episode
minute.
25. It has been a minute. It's definitely been a minute. And we're going to do a little something different for this one because we're going to kind of put our flag in the ground and call the first 25 episodes season one of this show. So we are going to look back over our past 24 episodes. And mainly what I want to do, Michael, is dive in and get your thoughts on a bunch of these classic horror films that you hadn't seen. And, you know, you've been very honest since their classic horror was a bit of a blind spot for you. So I'm very, very interested to see your thoughts overall on, you know, if you could call it a genre, classic horror, you know, going back, but your favorites in it. And then for you guys and girls out there listening, please let us know what your favorite is of the past 24 films we done.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
on that note, let's just jump off there. Let's jump off with the do you have a favorite?
I mean, okay. So yeah, I'm gonna go with yes, because like if you're gonna ask me the biggest discoveries, it's three.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but the top two are like almost a tie for biggest discovery. But I'm gonna go with Peeping Tom only because it was the biggest overall discovery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I had only basically heard of it and I knew its basic premise. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So also, and then it would be King Kong because like I couldn't believe that it had taken me. I'm really glad that I'm at the place that I'm at in life right now
Yeah.
because it was like you wanting to do this gave me like the excuse to give myself the excuse to spend money I should have spent earlier in life. But if I had, I don't know if I would have appreciated any of it nearly as much.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I understand that. I think that is I think even if you are a die-hard cinema fan, as I would say you are, you do have to not everyone can just go back and watch these films and really appreciate them based on what you may have grown up with and based on not being, you know, I know being able to watch black and white films is a real, you know, there's a real disconnect with some people. And I, you know, I'm, like I said, I've never been a gatekeeper. I don't think you're right or wrong either
Right.
way. I would always encourage people to go back and try and watch some of these films, especially if you're interested in the history of cinema and how films got to where they are and how, you know, where certain filmmakers' influences come from, as we've seen throughout this series. But yeah, never gatekeep. You know, some people love it, some people don't, some people can go back, some people can't. But I do think being in the right frame of mind, being, like you said, in the right place in your life where you want to expand, you know, maybe your knowledge of cinema, you want to go back a little bit further, you want to learn a little bit more. That's how I come into all this, was
Right.
being at college, studying filmmaking, you know, and then just kind of going back a little, you know, I didn't jump in with the oldest stuff, you know, I started, okay, let's go back to some 70s stuff, 60s, 50s. And I just kept going back, you know, when is it not going to connect with me? And it just turns out it kind of all connected with me in different ways. But I think my appreciation of filmmaking helped me in that sense. So yeah, so let's dive into Peeping Tom first of all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I knew that would be your I knew that would be your number one just because
Oh, did you?
of yeah, because of your
I
reaction
hate you,
to it.
but of course you did.
Yeah, because of your reaction to it, because of how many times you watched it, you know, within the short
in
space of time of me
48
say
hours.
of me saying that was the next film to us recording, you know, it was crazy. But that's amazing. Like, to me, I love that. I again, this whole idea of like, one of the things I hate the most is you see it on Twitter so much with where someone says they've just watched a horror film for the first time, maybe a
Right.
classic horror film for the first time, and you always get these people that are like, "Oh, you call yourself a horror fan because you haven't seen that?" You like, what a shitty attitude, man! Like, why
I don't
can't
know,
you get
man. Like
joy
I
out of someone discovering something for the first time?
That's
That's
why
what
I
I've
actually fuck
loved
with
about the
Twitter though,
series.
because like when the people I fuck with on Twitter, for the most part, at least the replies that Twitter shows me based on my interaction with Twitter, is fairly positive, because
Yeah, yeah,
one of the accounts that like I really like laughing at is like a, I think she's like 20 something, and she's always watching some shit that, like The Thing for the first time last week.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And just seeing her reactions is pretty hilarious.
Yeah, yeah, man. I mean, you should always get joy out of that. That's the beauty of what I've liked doing here is recommending certain films to you that, to be fair, I thought you would get something out of. And then when
Oh yeah.
one really does hit, like Peeping Tom or King
Mm,
Kong, something like that,
mm.
like that's, man, that's incredible. That's, you're like, for me, it's almost like watching it for the first time myself again, because like you're
No,
having
for
all
sure.
those reactions again. And to me, if you really love film, if you really love the genre, if you really love the history of horror, why would you not get joy out of that? I think that's
Yeah.
incredible. That's absolutely amazing. So, what is it about? Can you summarize what it was about Peeping Tom that really captivated you? What made you watch it so many times in those 40 hours? What blew your mind?
Um, I mean, just kind of the the film as a whole, if I'm gonna be honest, because it was, like the color palette was such that it had such extremes in color that even as a colorblind individual, it was very striking. And it's a product of the time, but also just the way that the camera moved, the audacity of the storytelling of the subject matter, the fact that like he's despicable, but he's also just like weird and awkward enough that like you go with it, and like you can't like be like, oh, I want to hang. Yeah, I feel so bad. Like you had a shit stick, like childhood, my
Yeah,
friend. But like these are wrong decisions. But like I don't know, just all of it. And there was that one specific sequence that I watched like 18, 20 times in a row. Literally, it was like 90. It's like a 90-second shot. It's a sweeping shot. I described it on the episode, and I there was just something about it. I was like, it's just it looks so
yeah.
good. It looks so
Oh,
good.
this, yeah, it's a just in terms of looks, it is a stunning looking film. My favorite shot of it is the one that always just comes to mind. I mean, there's many, but the one that really comes to mind is just the one where he's looking through the film reel as
Mhm.
it's going round. Oh, it's just the lighting and the way that's set up is
Oh, you see like
extraordinary.
him behind it, you mean? Oh yeah,
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 yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And yeah, I
And
think
you know
there's
what?
so
Now
much.
magically it's on things. Like I need to watch that again.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
because like I had to hunt. I had to hunt hard, and then finally like pay. And now it's on like all of the streaming things.
Yeah, it's so weird how I do think it's funny how some of these films all of a sudden they do kind of
Right.
enter the pop culture, and all of a sudden they start getting some real popularity behind them, and everyone seems to get behind, which is great. I absolutely
Like
love that.
bro, the new Beverly played King Kong versus Godzilla the other night at
How
midnight,
weird is that? I know, I know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
and
it's
I was at the
just,
new Beverly recently to see Dracula and Black Sunday, which we'll get into at some point.
I mean, that's crazy, right? That's absolutely
Yeah,
crazy.
in
But
so
yeah,
many ways.
the Peeping Tom, man, is stunning. The colors, the unsettling
Cinematography,
nature of it. That yeah, it's the whole
the
thing,
scale.
and also just the backstory of how it was so controversial in its day that it ruined the director's career.
Yeah.
And you've obviously got the weird stories of him bringing his son to set and all that kind of stuff. And it's just,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. So jump into your possibly joint greatest discovery, King Kong.
Oh
Now,
my god. See now this, I was like, oh no, go ahead. What were you
no,
gonna
no, no,
say?
go. Yeah, jump in.
Well, okay, so it was like now this I have maybe like what I felt was too much familiarity with it, and what turned out to be like no familiarity
Yeah,
with
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, because I'm
Well, it's
like,
so
okay, so there's
famous, right? It's so iconic.
but there's so many specific things that are iconic from it that it was one of those things, like overhype or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
we'll get into it at some point, but like Singing in the Rain is one of the biggest things that I had for 20 something years. I was like, I can't. There's no way. I'm
Right.
not
Okay.
gonna. And then I
Yeah.
finally watched it with this old timer that I knew, and I was like, oh my god, this is better than people have told
I
me.
mean,
How
it's a
dare you?
masterpiece. Yeah, Singing in the Rain's an
And
absolute masterpiece.
King Kong, I was just like, I had no idea it was so effects heavy.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I get the effects are of a style that, like, I mean, like, I work with some young people, like I work with some like 19 and 20-year olds, and so, like, you know, they're like, oh, I couldn't get into WandaVision because it started in black and white. And I was like, fair, but like, do you have any exposure to anything black and white, really? They're like, no,
Yeah,
man.
exactly.
And I'm
Yeah,
like, ooh, ow, okay.
yeah,
But like, that's where we are, and if that's where you are, continue your journey as you will. But if you can look at the amount of stop motion, the amount of scale, the amount of filmmaking, you know, rear projection in
yeah,
conjunction with
yeah,
all kinds of things, like, it's so huge and it's so incredible that something like that happened at that time,
yeah,
that, like, oh, I just, ooh,
yeah. Because
I
it's
need to see that next
different.
year.
It's very different going into that as a discovery compared to Peeping Tom, because I feel like as a film fan, or as a real cinema fan as you are, you would have been somewhat familiar with Peeping Tom, as in you've heard of it, you might know a bit of the history about it, you've heard people like Martin Scorsese talk about it.
Yeah,
But King Kong, everyone's heard of. Like, you don't even really need to be a film fan to know King Kong. Like, everyone
really,
fucking knows King
exactly.
Kong. Everyone has seen shots from that original King Kong. Everyone knows Fay Ray. Like it,
Hmm.
like that's not like you may have never seen the film, but there's a whole fucking generation of people that went to Universal Studios
Hmm.
and went on the rides that, looks exactly like the fucking monster in the film, right? Like, it's
I did get to go on it before it, unfortunately, it burnt down.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but and so, like, I was like, oh, whoa,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
awesome. But also, I had seen a special, you know, about Universal Studios so many times as a kid growing up in the Midwest, that I was like, one day, and then I got to see the thing before I ever
yes,
saw the movie,
yes,
like the decades almost literally before I ever saw the movie.
yeah.
Actually, literal decades. Oh, well, look at me. Anyway, never mind. Continue.
But yeah, it's like King Kong for me is it's such a special film because
The violence.
just on its own, it's a really good film.
Oh yeah.
Like, it is a properly good film. Like, I still think it holds up today. I think, yeah, if kids are going in that are used to the highest of high CGI and stuff, like, yes, there's going to be a disconnect there, and I completely understand that. But
Yeah.
I think if you are a fan of stop motion, if you are a fan of old techniques and you want to kind of basically see where it all started,
If the word
if it
analog excites you,
yes,
check
you
out this
are
movie.
you're gonna like, it's a good ride, man. You are gonna enjoy it. It's a good film. I think the performances are good. I think a bunch of it holds up. I still think a lot of the effects still work, as
Oh
in
yeah.
there's a lot of stuff now you can look at and you go, oh, I know exactly how they done that. I know exactly how they done that, because you can fucking do it on your phone, or you can, people learn it in school and college and stuff like that now. But there is stuff in King Kong that I think you still look at and go, how the fuck did they do that?
Hmm.
How did they make it look that good? Like, and then just as again coming back to this as a cinema fan, I think anyone listening to this podcast probably has a real love affair with film and cinema in a way. Just going in, watching that, and realizing that kicked off the shit that is now the most popular stuff in the world, as in the big effects driven films,
Hmm.
like the stuff that is larger than life. That is the stuff that gets people into the cinema. That's
Yeah.
that is the stuff
Absolutely.
that
Like, you're not getting Jurassic Park or the Avengers without a King Kong.
exactly that's why I do feel like people that automatically write off big blockbuster films is not real cinema. No, like, that's not true, because I think
Yeah.
big blockbuster films have a real connection to stuff like the original King Kong, the original Godzilla, which are considered real cinema, so how can they not be, right? Because that's the natural progression of where that would go. Yes, I would say that maybe some of them do rely too heavily on the effects more than the
Mm,
balance of the
yeah.
story, characters, and the effects. And I think you can have that balance. But that is cinema. That gets people into the cinema. And it all started with films like King Kong. So to go back and to see that and for that to still hold up, man, it's a stunning film. It really, really is.
For
And I
for
I
me to be
haven't
as captivated as I
there
was
you go.
on
Yeah.
size screen that I was watching it on, I just
Yes. Yes. Oh, it's incredible. It really is. It's one that it just amazes me every time I go back and watch it. And yeah, it's one I really, really enjoy going back and watching, just one that really,
yeah.
really hits you. It's absolutely incredible. So one of the films I wanted to bring up
Mm,
because it wasn't in your top two,
okay.
but I think it is one that did hit you and had a good impact on you. And it's one that I constantly kind of recommend to people because I think it's a nice bridge between if you kind of grew up on 70s, 80s, like horror cinema, I don't think it's too far from that. Actually, I think it's probably one of the films that most heavily influenced it. And it's not as much of a disconnect as the older stuff, as in King Kong.
Okay.
It's Carnival of Souls.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, what's he gonna say? What's he gonna say?
Yeah. So that was the very, very first
It
film
was.
I threw out there. That's the film that kicked off this whole series. Looking back on that one, how does that one sit with you now, having now seen 23 other classic horror films from what I define as classic horror, as in middle 1960s and before.
Well, I mean, even my reaction to it, like, when we did it was like incredibly different than my initial reaction, because my initial reaction was as someone who was not prepared to just kind of let the movie be the movie. It
Yeah.
was just this there's this movie that people you really like, and you should watch. Cool, what's this? And I was just so fresh, and I was just like, this is, and the quality of the public domain of it all that I was watching
Yes. Yeah.
was atrocious.
Yeah. It was really bad. Yeah.
And so seeing a pristine image of it, and being the person that I am now in life versus the
Yeah.
person that I was, what, like 20 years prior, I believe, I was just like, this is okay. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Like, again, and also, again, like, if even if you 100% figure out where the movie's going, it's the first time that shit had been done that I'm aware of.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Going in with the fresher mind, going in with the larger appreciation for what it could be and opening yourself up a bit, did it surprise you how much you saw in Carnival of Souls that was then picked up and put into other films? The biggest I would say is Night of the Living Dead.
I'm I believe the answer to that question is, I am so happy that I was at the place that I was when I watched it now, because I picked up on everything that it had influenced, because I had seen it and or absolutely
Yeah.
love it, and had seen it again and again and again and again. Whereas when I saw it for the first time, I had not seen many of the classics, or
Yes. Yes.
what you can argue as the classics.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So its
on
influence
that
was
note,
lost at the time. Go ahead. Yeah.
do you think that gives you a better appreciation for the older films when you've seen the films they have influenced? So for instance, let's just stick with Night of the Living Dead.
Okay.
Everyone's seen that, everyone's familiar with that, or any of those films, having seen them, having been a big fan of them, going back now and watching something like Carnival of Souls and being like, oh shit, okay, I can see where these influences come from. I can
Like to this day,
see.
like if you love Walking Dead, you will like if you love the way the Walking Dead looks and is
Yeah,
shot,
yeah,
it's all over. Carnival Souls has it all over.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you think that helps in appreciation, in your appreciation for those films?
Personally, it's undeniable. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that needs to be everybody's journey. So if you're hearing this for the first time, you're like, well, I've kind of seen Walking Dead, but I also for some reason am listening to these two fools talk about classic horror, even though I don't know who they are, and I like the way they speak. Let me check out some of these movies. If that's you and you watch it, and be prepared for it to be slow and different and weird and old. But if you can open yourself up to when it was made and how it was made, when it was released, like I don't know, man. It's something that's special if you can just let it be what it is and experience it, which is art in general.
No, no, no. I think no. That's. I think that sums it up perfectly and answers my question actually. So the next topic I want to jump into, which is again going back to you know the King Kong era, really just after, is one that's very dear to my heart and is probably more influential overall than any of the films we touched on, is the Universal monster films. So we
Mm.
covered what are considered the six, the seven. No, how many we do? Eight. We done eight, right? We done
We,
the
we
eight.
we did the whole basic franchise.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We done the eight big ones, which is Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, the
Mhm.
Invisible Man, Bride of Frankenstein, Wolfman, Phantom of the Opera, and Creature from the Black Lagoon. So
Correct.
they are considered the growls of the Universal monster stuff. Obviously, you got all the sequels in there and stuff. The only one that anyone considers to be really worthwhile is obviously the Bride of Frankenstein. There is some other good stuff in there, but obviously they're the ones that had the real impact and is still felt today, still talked about today.
Hmm.
Probably in the last 5 to 10 years have become more popular than they've ever been. Like they're everywhere now, right? Like every you see the classic
I
monster
saw it
stuff
with a
everywhere.
packed crowd as recently as the other day.
Exactly. Right. So jumping into that, I know you saw Dracula with Black Sunday, but just sticking with Dracula for the minute and then branching off to the other Universal monster films. You were obviously familiar with all of these films and you had seen some of them, but now seeing the whole collective in the same way that kind of I put King Kong to you about it being like very early cinema, and one of the things that you brought it up a couple of times with the acting in the films and the way they're directed and the set decoration. I actually had this conversation at a film festival very recently, a couple of weeks ago, where one of the things that I find very fascinating about these films, but also weirdly is a bit of a disconnect people, is because it's so theatrical.
Hmm.
But the history of it that you got to remember, which again I find so fascinating, is these films were being made when Hollywood was transitioning from silent films to talkies, as
Hmm.
they were known. And the reason it's so theatrical is because the silent actors and the silent directors had no idea how to do dialogue. So
Hmm.
they were bringing in a lot of theatre actors. So that's why it's theatrical, but also theatre directors. James Wow, who is probably the most well known and successful of all these directors.
We still need to
He,
do the Gods and Monsters episode, man.
oh,
That
definitely,
movie is, oh
definitely,
my God. That is like
definitely.
maybe my number three discovery of this that we didn't talk about
That
on
we
this
didn't even
really.
talk about. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But he was a theatre director, and he got brought into this because he could direct dialogue.
Yeah.
So that's one of the most fascinating things to me. But overall, how did that experience gel with you, and how does it now sit with you, having seen all of those films?
Again, it's a lot of set and setting, and I'm glad that like we decided to go chronologically because it was I can't describe a more perfect experience than going in wanting to be as receptive as possible, but still having a little bit like, man, this is old timey. And then that's kind of how I felt all through
Yeah,
while sitting through Dracula, as gorgeous and brilliant and everything as we talked about. It was like, okay, so but because I'd already seen Frankenstein, I was able to sort of ease
connect
into
with
it
that
a
a
little
bit
more.
easier.
I was
Yeah.
able to ease it, and it was during Frankenstein that I went, it's not old timey, it's theatrical. Click,
Yes.
and
Yep.
everything else. I was able to just give that filter and therefore flat out let be what it is and enjoy it better, if that makes
Yes,
sense. And
yes,
it's
yeah.
proper
No, it makes
grammar.
perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Yeah,
Okay.
and
But oh, no, go
I
ahead.
mean, for me, the thing that stands out the most from all those films, as you know, my biggest love affair with those films is the Jack Pierce makeup.
Yes.
I
Like,
know, obviously, everyone is aware of the Frankenstein stuff and probably is still his greatest creation. However, I do think the Mummy does rival it because that Mummy makeup is stunning. It still
next
works today.
level. It
It's like
absolutely
honestly,
does.
it still works today. I think it is
Especially if
one
you
of the
compare the
best.
actor to the look
Oh
of
yes,
makeup.
I think it's one of the best ideas of what a mummy would look like that's ever been put to screen. Still to this day, I think you could hold it up with any modern take on the mummy, and it works, man. Like if you ever want an idea of how really really good makeup will stand the test of time against the idea of visual effects. And look, I don't hate visual effects. I think there's a real place for them. But take a look at the Jack Pierce, Boris Karloff mummy and how that still works today. I think it does. I don't think anyone
Yeah,
would argue that.
absolutely.
And then look at the visual effect, the CGI mummy in the Brendan Fraser films.
I mean, it's dated, but it's also kind of awesome and also clearly influenced by.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, it works for what it is, but in my opinion, that is like
Full disclosure, I
severely
haven't seen that in
outdated
maybe
itself
15,
more
20
than the
years.
Jack
Yeah,
Pierce
so.
stuff,
Oh,
right?
no,
Like that is without a
inarguably.
doubt, without a doubt. Like
Yeah.
I think you can look at the Jack Pierce stuff and be like, oh shit, that holds up. Like I think you could with a few tweaks, you could put that in a film today and it would work.
Yeah.
I have no doubt about that. But you would never put that CGI mummy in a film today because it would be 10
No.
times you would do it 10 times better, right? Like it's just like way outdated quicker, I guess, because of the
I
technology, but also it
did
just
not
shows
see
you
the
how
Tom Cruise one.
fucking
Did
good
you?
Jack Pierce was. Yeah, I did. Yeah, yeah.
Is I mean, I know it's Hot Chick Mummy, but do they go full mummy at any point?
Uh, yeah, I think they do. I can't really remember. I think they do.
See,
Yeah,
that answers my question.
yeah.
Like,
No,
should I see
exactly,
it?
exactly. It's just not. It's just not that memorable. It's just
Okay.
not that memorable. It's just not. There's nothing that I think what really works with Jack Pierce's makeup, and then makeup artists that were influenced with him, opposed to the visual effects stuff, is there's something very unique about it. I think the reason why some visual effects stuff just doesn't land and doesn't work as well as it should is there's not anything that unique about it. Like any company could have done it. There's the exceptions would be something like Gollum, right? Like that is outstanding.
Mhm.
That really works. That really holds up. That is a great use of visual effect. And the design work, the uniqueness about it, the performance in it, that is very, very special. And that still
And we don't
works. It
get
still
to
holds up.
Gollum without the Frighteners.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. Of course we don't. The
No, I love the Frighteners. I'm
oh,
sorry. I was thinking
The
about it like
Frighteners is great.
minutes ago.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Frighteners is great. Peter Jackson's just he's great. The
He's
whole
one of
fucking
those dudes
thing.
that like whenever he comes up in conversation, I just kind of love it because occasionally like like I worked at a cafe in a swanky part of Southern California, so like people from all over the world would frequent. Whenever people from New Zealand would come through, inevitably he'd come up, and when I was able to go deep on his entire career, they were always impressed and like, oh, a true fan. Okay, no, we're
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
like if you look at that dude's career, of crazy ridiculous splatter of one of the most offensive movies ever made, depending on who you talk to in Meet the Feebles, that guy got Lord of the Rings
Oh yeah,
is
yeah,
is is a testament to talent and cinema. I don't know how else to put it. Like,
yeah. It's almost right place at the right time. It
mm-hmm.
just the history of how that film come to be is quite fascinating. But the yeah, oh man, the guy's talent is. to be able to jump from one thing to the other is absolutely, yeah, it's incredible. I always go to bat for Peter Jackson. I think he's an incredible filmmaker.
Yeah.
He really, really is. All right, dude. Kind of rounding this off a little bit. Like oddly rounding off what is now become season one of the show. We kind of went into what I feel was definitely the hardest for you to get on board with, which was the 1950s sci-fi era with the
It was
original
for a
with the
minute there.
Thing, the Thing.
It
Yeah.
was. It was.
So what was it about? Because that era more than any, I would say, is very, very American. As in
Okay.
the Universal Monster stuff was very heavily influenced by, obviously you had a lot of British filmmakers and actors working within those departments. I would say it was probably more heavily influenced by European cinema, German cinema, stuff like that. A lot of the 60s stuff we done, again, somewhat a lot of influences from European cinema, but the 50s stuff, that sci-fi atomic boom stuff, that's very American.
I
Like
very
there
much
was not
appreciated it, but it was just. It's.
do you think do you think being American, being somewhat familiar with that time period in your country's history, do you think that served as a little bit of a disconnect for that? And I say that in the way of some of the older British films that are very British, very uniquely British of a time. I do find it a little bit hard to connect with those films just because like you've kind of always grown up with it, so there isn't something that special
No,
about
thank
it,
you,
you know?
because that's exactly it. You rerailed my train. It's absolutely like I was probably most familiar with that style of filmmaking,
Yeah,
because of like the way I was raised, very conservatively. Like I could
yeah,
watch a lot of Nick at Night, so I was familiar with a lot of recorded media from
yeah,
that era,
yeah,
and it was kind of like a Nick at Night horror movie, which just came out of my mouth for the first time, and if that means something to you, you get what I mean.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and yeah, that's totally what it was. It's totally what it was.
yeah.
And it was like I appreciated it, but it was a Nick at Night horror movie, and I just wasn't there for it. And it was like maybe two or three deep where I finally like relaxed into it again, right?
Of course, yeah,
Like yeah,
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 yeah, yeah. Okay.
yeah.
No,
No, that
that's what
makes
it is.
perfect sense.
Okay.
That makes absolutely perfect sense, dude. All right, sir. So to wrap this up a little bit, at the very top of the recording,
Mhm.
you said your two biggest discoveries were Peeping Tom and King Kong. So now I'm going to take them two off the table
Okay.
and ask you to give three suggestions for people that may have listened to this podcast but not going to watch these films, or for someone maybe discovering us on this episode and is going to go back.
Hmm.
What three films outside of Peeping Tom and King Kong, because I think, it's very well registered that you would recommend them to. What
Absolutely.
other three would you recommend above all else?
Black Sunday, Invisible Man. I need a moment to think.
Yeah.
for three, but Black Sunday and Invisible Man. Oh,
Hell yeah.
Freaks!
Yes. Yes, of course. Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I mean, if I'm gonna throw. Oh, see, I would have said Freaks as well. So I'm not going to say Freaks. I'm not going to say any that you've said. I'm going to
Okay,
go
all right. Oh, I'm sorry. I
with.
took your favorite. I took
No,
your
no,
whole
no.
favorite.
That's fine.
I'll just.
That's fine. I'm going to go. And do you know what? I'm not going to say Black Sunday either because that's bloody obvious. That's what the podcast is named after. So I'm not going to say it. What I'm going to say is Carnivore Souls, The Uninvited, and Phantom of the Opera.
My third favorite discovery of this journey was actually the radio adaptations of The Uninvited. That was my
Oh,
number three
nice,
up top.
nice,
Yeah,
lovely.
it was a real special experience if you have access to. I don't know if the version that's on the Criterion streaming app has the full set of special features, but if you're listening to this right now and you're in America, the Criterion half off sale is happening at Barnes and Noble, and you could acquire a
Yep.
copy of it and listen to these things because they're two very different adaptations of the exact same material
Yes. Yeah.
that are equally fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I completely agree. And the Criterion Blu-ray in the UK has it as well. So
mhm.
yeah, for those of you listening in the UK, you can go and pick that up. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely incredible, dude. Dude, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. That is going to close out season one. That is not done. We will be back.
Oh, absolutely.
However, over the next month or so, I am going off to make a film. So I need to put all my energy into that. Michael, where can people find you and what may you be up to in the next couple of months before the show returns?
I kind of only mess around on Twitter, and that would be at Blue of Shoe, Blue the color OF, shoe like the thing you put on your foot. And I've got a few pokers and a few fires about some personal podcasts that I'll be putting up. And I will blast it on Twitter when I do that. And I don't blast things like people talk about doing that, so I should start doing that. I should.
Yeah,
It's
get some
weird.
stuff out
It's
there.
weird, but I should push the
Yeah, I
stuff
know
that
what
I
you
already
mean.
have.
I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah, get some stuff out there, dude.
Yeah.
I Yeah, behind the scenes, you have mentioned some of the stuff that you got coming up. So yeah, boys and girls, go out there, follow Michael, and get prepared for that because there is definitely some stuff coming from him. And then once I am done with the film, we will be back with season two, and we're going to kick off with some silent era horror films. So
Absolutely.
look
Yeah.
forward to that. So to everyone out there that is listened via whatever platform you listen to, if you listen just to the podcast on whatever platform, or if you like to have some of the behind the scenes images on YouTube, however you listen to us, thank you very, very much for joining us for these first 25 episodes. And we will be back with season two and another 25 episodes in a couple of months' time. So, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me, Michael. It has been an absolute pleasure. And we will
Thanks
be
for
back.
finally kicking my ass down the path I needed to go down for decades. So.
Oh, yeah. And don't worry, there's a lot more to come.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, there is. Yeah.
There's a lot more to come. Do not worry. All right, guys, thank you so much. I really, really do appreciate all your love and support. And until next time, Horror Hounds, stay very, very safe.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.